So my first question, this is the second time that I've interviewed a composer in the past 2 weeks who has started as a drummer, and a
Oh yeah.
drummer in
Uh-huh.
punk bands, which is very
Yeah.
interesting. So
Yeah.
how did you make that leap from drumming to film composing and punk bands, I guess, too?
Yeah. I mean, played piano and other things like growing up. I was in choirs and stuff like that. But yeah, in when I got to middle school, I was playing in grunge bands and then like the punk, it was all happening at that time. So like punk and hardcore and all that stuff. And yeah, I mean, I think drums are one of the like few instruments I guess that I just kind of like gravitated towards and started just kind of teaching myself. I snuck into my brother's like rehearsal space. He was in a band. He was my older brother, and they left their drums in the garage, and so I just like went in there, listened to Nirvana, and taught myself how to play drums. And then kind of got into the punk scene, kind of after that, kind of took over. So yeah, then I was recording my bands and producing and stuff like that, and then in high school, I was in all state choir and I got exposed to some like really interesting, more experimental modern choral music that like had really interesting sonorities that I hadn't heard before. And I think my brain just like lit up, and and so I started writing choir music, but most of it was kind of like post like apocalyptic lyrics and stuff like that. It's very kind of modern in aesthetic, and then from there just went on to discover other modern composers, like John Corigliano and like the Bang on a Can composers and like David Lang and Evan Zaporin and and like yeah, Meredith Monk, and like kind of that's how I got into the classical world, is kind of more through that and through film, than actually through like classical composers of the traditional nature, like Mozart or Beethoven or Bach or whatever. So yeah,
That's
yeah. So
fascinating.
and like my music that I wrote in grad school, was, or in college and grad school, was pretty atonal. There were some minimalist elements in it, in some of it, but it was a lot of like kind of aggressive stuff.
That's very interesting
So
because
yeah,
I have a question later about it because I guess I can kind of skip there now and
yeah,
we can circle back. But Hard Eyes, in a time when so many horror movies are atonal, sort of dissonant
yeah,
sounds, your score is not. Your score
yeah,
is like bombastic and melodic.
yeah,
So, can you talk a little bit about if that's your background, why did it
yeah.
not come forward for Hard Eyes?
Well, I mean, there's elements of it in there, but Hard Eyes is a particular type of horror film. It is one that calls back to the classics of like the 80s and 90s. That have a bit more of a Hollywood aesthetic to them. They are not just like, terror. They're not fully just like terrifying, like psychologically and all of that. It's a fun film. It's a film that calls upon those references and that period of time, both in horror, but also in rom coms. So it's a slasher first, but is scary first, but it does have at its heart also this romance undercurrent to it that plays. So it wouldn't have been able to, I think, serve both things. We wanted a strong theme, something that felt like of that era. Maybe like some Chris Young or whatever, and then Alan Silvestri, for like the romance and whatnot. So kind of playing off of these tropes in a way. So if it had been a different type of film, probably would have leaned more into the more abstract and atonal stuff. But I like it needed a strong theme, and we wanted to have like one of those classic stalker moments. So like some people have compared some of it to like Bernard Herrmann kind of elements in there in the strings. Which to me I was kind of thinking Stravinsky, but whatever. Like I think probably Herrmann was like, I like Stravinsky. But so that like, yeah, I don't know, some of the Rite of Spring stuff, some of those like chugging kind of string things that are in there, you know. So yeah, I think that's kind of ultimately why we landed there, is like it needed to feel modern and fresh, but with a nod to the that period of time, because that's kind of what the movie's playing with, and that's why it's so fun, I think.
Yeah. So how going back now, how did you get involved with Hard Eyes?
Well, Josh Ruben, the director, and I have been friends for quite a while now. I don't remember exactly what year we met, but I feel like it was like 2010 maybe, 2010. And yeah, so funny enough, like we met each other on set. I had been hired on to do some like arrangements and mashup things for Allison Williams from Girls.
Hmm.
So before she was on Girls, so this is like she was just trying to put out some YouTube videos and things like that, and so I did some arrangements for her. We became good friends, but like on set during the shoot, I met Josh, who was producing the project, and it was a bunch of people from the College Humor crew.
Hmm.
So then I got into the College Humor world and started doing parody work and like music for sketches and stuff. And one of my early claims to fame was I did this like Nickelback parody called "Look at This Instagram," and like basically just like like really dove into the sound of the production on "Look at This Photograph" from Nickelback, and did my best vocal impression of them. So yeah, but we've been friends ever since. And then this is our first time actually getting a chance to work on a feature together. So it's been such a joy. I mean, he has such, Josh is just such a student of film and of these genres, and he just knows it so well. And it was so fun to play in this world with him. Yeah,
Yeah. So you talked a little bit about wanting to make that distinct theme, like for
yeah,
the slasher, like Michael Myers,
yeah.
Halloween kind of thing. So can you talk a little bit about, it's a three notes melodic that, can you
Yeah,
talk a
there's
little bit
there's
about
kind of
that?
like, yeah, there's I think what allows it to kind of have a lot of mileage is its
Mhm.
simplicity. So like if I could play it really quick, just it's just like um and so you can invert that, you can play with that and all the different ways that can modulate on that type of thing. Or take it up, it's just kind of like a half note whole, a half note and then like a minor third, or like half step and minor third kind of thing. And so you can just kind of really work that in so many different ways when you're working in octatonic sort of harmonies and whatnot. So that was kind of that was the idea, is like have something that can always be like kind of a big statement that isn't too long to remember, and so but you can kind of build off of that. And so that was kind of the idea, is giving him this little motif. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
They describe some of the string parts as aleatoric. I
Uh-huh.
hope I'm pronouncing that
Yeah,
right.
yeah, yeah. Aleatoric. Yeah,
I'm a band dropout.
yeah.
So can you describe what aleatoric means to
Yeah.
non-musical people and then like how that works into composing?
Totally, totally. So yeah, aleatory is essentially just like a modern writing technique where you can kind of give instrumentalists defined parameters on what you want them to do over a period of time. So you don't like it can be very specific on notes and not on rhythm, or very specific on rhythm but not on notes, or it could be gestural, like swinging up or going down, or all these types of different descriptive ways of dealing with music, so that you create texture, but it's within sort of a sense of it has an element of chaos and improvisation to it. So for a lot of horror scores, and you'll use graphic notation, things that were kind of developed from Christoph Penderecki, or like some early modernist composers that essentially you describe the sound that you're going for, and you give them some sort of visual representation, and then they experiment within that language, and you find the sound. And so a lot of the horror scores and scratchy tones and sort of wild gestures and stuff like that are aleatoric figures, because you kind of give them a general sense of what they want, like maybe some sort of visual representation and some sort of description, and then oftentimes like a line or a bar that continues, for 6 beats or 6 bars or whatever. And then okay, you start here and you move up, and then you go to a scratch tone, and then everyone glisses to the highest note possible at the end, right? So it's just a different way of writing stuff that wouldn't really make sense to be so specific on what every note people should play, because then you'll have too much homogeny. You want something that's pretty wild and crazy, and yeah. So that's the technique of aleatoric scoring. Yeah.
That's all. Yeah, I mean but it's chaotic, but it sounds like it all works together, which is I feel like a very impressive
Yeah.
feat.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Organized chaos.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great way of describing
Yeah.
it. There's I think a bit of a choir in the background of your score. So
Yeah.
did that come from? It seems like loving choir is a very deep thing within you. So can you talk about
Yeah.
the development of that and including that in the score?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so from just like a creative standpoint, the idea is to have a little bit of a hint towards the sort of gothic nature of those scores as well, of like the sort of classics, and have like elicit a little bit of that. And if you see the film, no spoilers, but there are elements where they land in something that has a little bit of that gothic vibe. And so calling back to that a little bit is kind of what we were planning on doing there. But on this one, everything that all the choral stuff is like programmed. So there's not actually any real live voices. It's all programmed like synth voice. But it's layered in a way that it's hard to tell, and and like you're not hearing specific lyrics or anything like that. And so yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't seen the film yet. They weren't sending screeners, but
Yeah.
man, the score just made me so pumped to go see it. I'm gonna try like today or tomorrow.
Oh,
But
oh, great.
yeah,
I'm so excited. Yeah. I
yeah,
mean, it's a fun movie.
yeah,
It's one you're like you'll be laughing, it's bloody, you'll be cracking up, and it's got like great heart to it as well. So
yeah,
it's one of those films that you have to see in theaters.
yeah,
And it's so much better when you see with a group, and it really really highlights, I think, like the sort of collective experience of going to movies.
yeah,
It's cool.
yeah. My last question for you, if
Yeah,
you've got time for one more.
absolutely. Yeah.
The Wedding Banquet, just because I loved the original,
Yeah.
I'm very excited about
Yeah.
the remake or
Yeah.
restyling of it. What was it like go? I imagine it's very different tones of the scores. So what was it
Yes.
like
Yeah.
switching from Hard Eyes to the Wedding Banquet?
Um, I'm lucky that so many of my scores are so different. Like, it's a blessing and a curse. I can't ever rely upon what I just finished in order to like, keep the momentum going. I kind of have to, try something new. But yeah, I mean, very, very different. So this is like big orchestra, violent, wild, crazy. And then, for the wedding banquet, it was more sort of Pacific Northwest, lo-fi, guitar driven, simple and pared back, and not doing too much, just kind of like doing a very light lift, I think, in sort of these more emotional or playful moments. So
The
yeah,
polar opposites.
polar opposites, like it definitely keeps it interesting, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Well, thank you
yeah.
so much, Jay. I mean,
My pleasure.
looking through the list of scores you've done, it's just like some of my favorite things over the past couple years. So
Oh, thank you
thank
so
you so
much.
much
I
for your
appreciate
time.
it. I thank you. I appreciate you taking the time to chat. So,
Of course. You have a
all
great rest
right.
of your day.
All right, you too. Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.